Hey guys, Pitmaster here. I am here with the doc. Bang! And we're doing Pitmaster and the doc. It's a podcast
On Christmas Eve.
on Christmas. That's how dedicated we are to you guys. We're doing this on Christmas Eve. We're going to talk about the UFC South Korea. It wasn't really it was a good card, but it didn't have a lot of star-studded. It wasn't really a star-studded fight. Except for the main event, Frankie Edgar versus the Korean Zombie, and did a Volkan fight against Alexander Rakic, or whatever. Anyway, and the Korean Wonder Boy fought, right? Or is that what is it?
He's a boy. Superboy.
Superboy.
He looks like
fought.
a Superboy.
He does. But let's talk about it. Let's start with the Frankie Edgar fight. First of all, the fight was taken on short notice, like really short notice. Because Korean Zombie was going to fight Brian Ortega. So that's a whole different fight for Korean Zombie. So I don't know who had the advantage of the last minute. I guess it depends if Frankie Edgar trains on his off time, like if he doesn't have a fight scheduled. And most UFC guys don't once you get that high. The lower guys always be training, okay? Always be training. ABT. Always be training because you never know. If you're on the lower card, you fight for any of the smaller shows, and then all of a sudden they call you on Wednesday and they said, "Oh, we had Brian Ortega pulled out. Can you fight the Korean Zombie?" You better be ready when the UFC calls, because if you say, "Nah, I haven't been training," they will probably never call again. But if they do call and you're ready, right, and then all of a sudden you win a last minute fight, the UFC looks very highly on that, and so does everyone else. But the UFC does. You scored a lot of points with Dana if you come in as a last minute replacement and you end up winning. Even if you lose and you put up a real good fight, Dana remembers that shit. So you should always be training if you're coming up as an MMA fighter, because you never know when you're going to get that call for the big leagues. Okay. Now, with that said, most of the guys that have made it that far aren't always training because they did that or they paid their dues. Now they're fighting in the UFC. So they're not always training. Some guys do, some guys don't, but not like the younger guys should. I don't know if Frankie Edgar was always training or not because the fight ended in the first round, so that really didn't come into play. But he seems like the guy that is always training. He seems like a blue collar guy that has a serious work ethic. If you just watch him fight, his whole career, he has a serious work ethic. So I have a feeling he's always be training. That's
How
just
far out did Brian Ortega drop out? Do you know? Was it a week?
No, I thought it was a couple weeks.
Maybe a few weeks.
Yeah, I think it was like a couple weeks. But sometimes that's better because it doesn't give you a whole camp to stress. It doesn't give you a whole camp to get hurt. Because during the camp, you're more likely to get hurt than not during the camp. Because you're training harder, more intense. You're a lot, there's a lot going on in your head. The nerves start coming into play. And a lot of people, it makes them more susceptible to get injuries. Plus, you might be overtraining because you got a fight coming up and you get all jazzed up about the fight. Then you can overtrain. If you're just training like you always train regular, you're still in shape, so you're training. And then all of a sudden they say, "Hey, can you fight next week?" Sometimes that's better than a whole camp. It really is. It depends on your in-between fight work ethic.
Well, and then Brian Ortega went out. Did you hear what happened to him?
No.
So he tore his ACL in training. Someone got a single leg on him and hiked it up, and he twisted his knee. And they said it's a partially torn ACL, so he did say he doesn't need surgery, but he couldn't take this fight. Sounds like a pretty bad injury. He hurt it tear, and he was on crutches. So
I
I
wonder who
don't
did
know.
that.
A lot of those end up being unstable and end up having further knee injuries and needing surgery. So we'll have to see. We'll have to watch Brian Ortega and see how he does trying to come back early this year without surgery.
I wonder who did that. Whoever did that's in deep shit at that camp. I'm telling you right now. The second it happened, Brian Ortega probably said, "You fight." He probably yelled at him. Probably the coaches yelled at him. This poor guy.
It was right around Thanksgiving, they said.
I would not want to be that guy. I'd rather be the guy than Brian Ortega. But I had in fact, one of your buddies.
Hang on, I'll be right back.
Okay, one of his ortho guys told me once that he coached for oh, cool. He told me that at any given time in on any NCAA Division One or I don't know Division One or two whatever team wrestling team, that at least 80% of the people on the team have some type of tear in their knee, whatever injury that might be. He said that 80% of the team on any college level wrestling team has some type of knee injury, a tear. Your partner told me that.
Oh yeah,
long time ago.
Well, it's pretty high. We see a lot of knee injuries in wrestlers. It's pretty common.
Wow, 6 knee surgeries. Yeah, I can imagine. So anyway, the fight. Okay, so the fight happens, and the Korean Zombie is very methodical. He doesn't do a lot of head movement. He doesn't do a lot of lateral movement, and that is a very good thing for him sometimes, and it's a very bad thing for him sometimes. He's been caught a few times, but in this fight, he was so methodical and aggressive coming forward. He ended up catching Frankie. I think it was a straight right or a straight left. He's a southpaw. I don't know. It was a straight hand, and caught him. Frankie was down, and he went to the ground. Korean Zombie followed him down, and Mark Goddard did a great job because a lot of guys would have stopped it. But you could tell that Frankie was trying to get off the bottom and trying to intelligently, which is the key word, intelligently defend himself. So Mark Goddard let the fight go on, and he kept saying, "You gotta get out, Frankie. You gotta keep working, Frankie." And Frankie was. Mark Goddard did a great job. Frankie made it to his feet. But then in the next exchange, he got caught again, and Mark Goddard could tell just by that one punch, that Frankie was done. You could just tell. And so he stopped it perfectly, and fight was over. It didn't look like, it wasn't a brutal knockout like, any knockout is a brutal concussion, but it wasn't one of these where he's out for a long time or he fell forward, one of those really dramatic ones. But he was out, what a guy, man. What a fucking workhorse he is. He's the ultimate hard-working blue-collar stud, and good for Korean Zombie. Korean Zombie doesn't like me, and I don't know why. It could be because I wasn't really teasing him, but I was like talking to him about kimchi and Korean food once. I don't know. Maybe I offended him. He doesn't speak that good English. And then the next time I saw him, we were in a dressing room. I think Glover or somebody was fighting, and he was there. And I go, "Hey, what's up, Korean Zombie?" And he wouldn't even look at me. And so he's pissed at me for something. But anyway, he did a great job, and I hope Frankie Edgar's fine. I don't think this means Frankie Edgar is done by any means, unless he wants to be. But it was a first round knockout, bing, with a right hand. That's it.
What other good fights were on this card?
That fight was pretty good. The semi-main, Volkan was just, I don't know, Alexander just was like, he just wasn't pulling the trigger, and Volkan was, and he was much more effective with everything, with punches, shots, and and he just looked more like he was much more an effective, it looked like he was more effective, because I think the other guy wanted to take it to the ground a lot. I think it might have gone once, but it just looked like Volkan was more effective with his wrestling, and with the striking. So it was a decision, but it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't it wasn't a landslide. Nobody almost got knocked out. I think Vulcan was just able to land a few more punches, and I think he did better in the clinching too, and I think that was a big thing. So there's that one. Then we got the Wonder Boy, or the
Superboy.
Superboy.
Doohoo Choi.
Yeah, he fought a guy named Charles, who looked really awkward. Jordan. It's Air Jordan. Instead of Air Jordan, his nickname is Air Jordan. But anyway, he was really awkward but really aggressive. Like he looked like he was gonna be. But when the fight started, it looked like Wonder Boy just had his number, because Wonder Boy was catching him, and Wonder Boy hits hard. You could tell this guy was like, not having it. But then he caught Wonder Boy coming in. He caught him coming in. I think it was an uppercut. He caught him coming in though. No, I think Wonder Boy was throwing an uppercut, and he threw a straight right, and just KO'd Wonder Boy. And that was not
That's the end of round 2.
Yeah, so the first round, I would be willing to bet that went to Wonder Boy, or Superboy, and then the second round, it looked like he was going towards him too, but he was starting to get a little aggressive, and like his Korean counterpart, the Korean Zombie, he doesn't move his head a lot. He depends a lot on his knockout power, and he got caught with this one. He got caught coming in on this one. But I don't know, these guys do like mandatory military. They have to go in the military. We are so spoiled here, guys. Could you imagine? And they can't go out. He can't go out and fight. He can't do this. He can't do this. The only reason he's able to fight in this card was because it was in Korea, South Korea. He wouldn't have been able to fight.
He doesn't fight very frequently.
No, and because he's in the army and they won't let him out. Like our guys in the army, like Tim Kennedy, he could fight as much as he wants pretty much. He goes overseas and fucking does crazy shit, but they let him because it's good for the military. It's good for our people. It's good for everyone. But I think they're a little stricter with that kind of stuff in South Korea. So that's the reason he doesn't fight as much. So
well, don't they have mandatory service for males in South Korea?
I think they do. That's why, imagine if that was here. Then again, they're not going all over the place, doing crazy wars either. So I think when they're doing, I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, 2 years. Somebody's saying it's 2 years. Yeah. But it's...
At least 21 months of military service is mandatory between 18 and 35.
That's not that
They've been doing that since 1957.
That's not a bad idea, guys. That's not a bad idea. That is not a bad idea. People would... I'll tell you what. That would turn a lot of fucking beta males into alpha males. I'm telling you that right now.
Conscription to the U.S., huh?
Is what?
Conscription is what they call it there.
They do?
Yeah.
It's you don't serve, you go to jail. And I mean, that's not a bad idea. The only thing I have against that here is because of our bureaucracy, our government likes to go all over the place into, wars and die for no reason. Imagine if you had to do that, and you did. You got drafted, and you go to Vietnam, and then you die. And then your family's like a couple years later, we realized we were there for absolutely no reason at all. Like 60,000 of us died of our people for no reason at all. So with that said, I don't think that would be a good idea here in the United States. But if we didn't do that and go all over the place like South Korea doesn't, I think it's a great. I think all males, when they graduate high school, should do at least basic training for the military. I think they should have to do basic training. That's what I think.
It's interesting. They did the country gives them an exemption if they win a medal at the Olympics. So the athletes get exempted if they come back with a medal.
Well,
there's some
motivation.
There's some motivation for bringing back a medal.
Yeah. And then we got, all right, another one. This was a little unusual. Mike Rodriguez fought Da Un Jung, who's a Korean light heavyweight. And he was like buff and slim. He didn't look, fat or anything. He was tall. He was 6'4". Um, um, it's it just looked like, I don't know. I've never seen a Korean that big and just, I wasn't expecting him with that knockout power. He's brutal knockout power. I don't even know what he's done in the past, but he knocked out Mike Rodriguez just brutally with just a freaking straight right in the first round. It's like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? But it was a brutal first round knockout. So that was that fight. And then the one before that was, these guys didn't look like much going. I saw them warming up and kind of heard about them a little bit. They were talking about, didn't look like it was being much of a fight. And the guy's nickname, the Iron Turtle. That's what the Korean guy's nickname was, the Iron Turtle. I'm nothing against that nickname, but that was his nickname. And he fought a guy named Leo Pigangyang.
Who traditionally gives the nickname in MMA?
Nobody.
Is it different than boxing?
No, it's not. Nobody traditionally gives it to either. I gave my guys the nicknames, but I think maybe the fans do in some, or I don't know who does.
But it's up to the fighter to adopt it.
Yeah. So
most fighters have some kind of nickname.
Yeah, most do.
Which one's the Iron Turtle?
Oh, yeah, he fought. Yeah, that one.
Oh.
No, he fought.
Jun Young Park.
Yeah, he fought.
He fought Power Bar.
Yeah, the Power Bar. The Power Bar is from Canada, I'm pretty sure. He was from Canada, and I don't know. It just he looked a little soft. The Korean Turtle. He looked soft physically, but he could fight, man. He was a boxer. He had nice kicks, nice wrestling too, but he was mainly a boxer, and his fucking hands were on fire. Yeah, he decisioned the Power Bar, but it wasn't. It didn't look close at all. He was just all over him. At every turn, out wrestled him, out struck him, out kicked, out punched him, out kicked him. This guy was pretty good. I can't pronounce his name. Jun Young Park, and they call him the Iron Turtle. He was pretty damn good. An 85 pounder too. You don't see many middleweights Koreans either. But he looked a little softer than Da Jung did. He looked like he was soft, like he was pushing up to make middleweight. But his conditioning was good. It was a 3-rounder, and it was a very active 3-rounder. And he threw a lot of stuff. So he won that fight, and he definitely impressed me. The Korean Turtle is someone to watch out for. The first fight of the main card was it was a Korean guy who looked like he was like half Korean, half white. Kyung Ho Kang, and he's in the military too. So he only fights in Korea. And then he fought a guy from China. But this guy from China trains at Team Alpha Male. And so I actually expected the Team Alpha Male guy to win, just because he trains at Team Alpha Male, and this guy's in the army. He doesn't get out much, But the guy, I think it was a decision. It was a decision.
It was, yeah.
But what was weird about it? Let me see. Yeah, I don't know. I think I mean, it was just constant takedowns were the key win for this guy. Kyung Ko Kang, his takedown, his timing was beautiful, because every time the Chinese guy came in on him, he changed his level and shot, and boom, he took him down, and he kept him down. Does this say how much time was on the ground?
No.
Oh, it doesn't? Like how much time?
Just show straight.
Yeah, he was down on the ground. He held him down and did. I mean, But let me tell you something. On this fight, what a big takeaway from this fight. The Chinese guy had some fucking beautiful elbows. He like posted out and just dropped elbows over and over. And the Korean guy had a brutal cut. I mean, a brutal cut. In fact, I think it was a split decision, if I remember correctly. I actually think one of the judges gave it to the Chinese guy, Liu. And I see why. There was a lot of damage. He landed, I mean, a huge number of elbows from the bottom. And like I said, he opened up a huge cut on the Korean too. But the Korean won. It was a decision, and I thought he won, definitely. But he did get cut, and it showed you can do some damage from the guard. If somebody's in your guard, if you're on the bottom, you can do damage. Remember Bas Rutten against I forget who he fought, but he like destroyed him from the bottom. The guy was pouring blood on Bas Rutten. But anyway, I'd rather be on top. Don't even say it. I know what you're going to say. That's what she said.
Keep it clean.
That's what she said. Never mind. Anyway, okay, so that's it for the card.
That was it for UFC. What about boxing? You want to talk about boxing at all?
Let's just. We neither one of us saw that fight.
The only thing I thought was interesting. So this is the Julio Cesar Chavez fight. He's the son of a famous boxer. Do you think that plays into this at all?
I think it plays into in a lot. I mean, but in both ways, because it's definitely it's definitely an advantage for him. He has to live up to the dad, and that's not just any boxing champ. That's Julio Cesar Chavez. He's a Mexican icon. It's like if you ever see the Mother Mary candles in the grocery stores, Guadalupe and stuff. Cesar Chavez is equal to that. He's prayed to when they go to bed at night. They pray to Julio Cesar Chavez. I mean, he was probably a god among boxers.
Who's a bigger Mexican sports star than him? Is there one?
I don't think there was.
I don't think there is one.
Yeah. So he's that level. He's like high level. Then his son comes along, and his son's a pot smoking, no work ethic fucking guy, and he's good though. He has some talent. But he's nothing like his dad. And his dad, every time he watches him fight, you can tell his dad loves him and all, but his dad like, oh, you fucking prick. Why do you make me, look at that. Look what I did for you. I made you grow up rich. I gave you everything. I gave you fucking, I gave you a lifestyle, that like almost no one can have. And now you're punking out on me like this. So his son missed weight for this fight. Okay, he missed weight.
Tell him how much money he lost because
he lost $1 million because he missed weight.
Missing weight.
But he doesn't give a shit because his dad is Julio Cesar Chavez. He missed weight. All right. And they had to change venues or something.
Well, they ended up at the Talking Stick Arena, which is the old America West Arena in Phoenix, because my brother's here visiting for Christmas, so he was at the fight.
That's why then they had to change venues because he couldn't pass the drug test, or he wouldn't take the drug test, so they had to change venues to an Indian reservations. Talk about sellouts, but okay. Missed weight, wouldn't take the drug test, okay? And then he quits on his stool. What round was it?
5th.
He quits on his stool. You know what? Out of missing weight and then not taking the drug test, that's bad enough. But quitting on his stool, his dad he almost exploded. His head probably almost exploded. What a fucking embarrassment to Julio Cesar Chavez. Quitting in your stool.
Picture you showed me of his dad.
His dad just like this when it happened. When he finally quit, the camera scanned on his dad, and his dad's like, "You fucking embarrassing piece of shit." Oh, that's embarrassing.
And then the crowd, of course, is throwing trash and stuff at him as he left. It's really sad, too, for the guy he's fighting, because the fight turns into being about that, not about that guy beat him. It turns into about how the other guy quit, which I think kind of robs the other boxer that we're not even talking about of his moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he's no Roberto Duran. Roberto Duran is one of the greatest boxers that ever lived. The biggest stain on Roberto Duran is he quit in a fight once. He quit in the fight. He said, no mas. Remember? No mas.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, that's what you remember.
Right, no mas. He says he had terrible stomach cramps. He could barely even stand up, and he was losing the fight. and it looks like he was getting frustrated in the fight because he was fighting Sugar Ray Leonard, and I think he beat Sugar Leonard previously, but this fight he was not winning, and he was losing the fight, and he quit. He quit in the.
Well, some fighters look for a way out during the fight too, versus between rounds, right? They kind of let themselves get choked out. Or...
Well, in MMA, it's a little easier, and if you want to get yourself, if you're trying to quit in the middle of a boxing match, you gotta get knocked the fuck out, and it's harder to fake that because the punch has to land. Like the punch can't go by you, and then you fall, and then you act like you're knocked out. You'll be found out real quick.
In MMA, you simply stop defending yourself, and they'll stop the fight.
Yeah, which they should, but they do. Yeah. So that's embarrassing. Poor Julio Cesar.
So couple factors. He grows up obviously not having to scrap for money. That's one factor. The other factor is he probably grew up maybe even pushed into boxing in some degree where he may not have chosen to do that on his own. Who knows? So he may not have the same drive that his dad had for multiple reasons. You can pick whichever one of them you want. But for whatever reason, I don't know. Does a fighter... I had this conversation with you. If you have money, can you be as good of a fighter as if you don't? Or if you have a famous father fighter, does that make a difference? Who lives up to their dad? Who lives up to their dad that was a fighter that came along and fought? Does anyone come to mind?
I can't think of one. I can't. Think
Yeah,
of
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe there is one, but
yeah, I'm sure there's father sons. I know in MMA and I can think of some in MMA. But yeah, I can't really think of one. But I don't think the money thing has anything to do with it. I really don't. I don't think hunger, like when you say you're not hungry, that doesn't have anything to do with being not eating enough, because the poorest people in America are the most obese. So they're not hungry physically. They could be hungry for a title, hungry for a good job, hungry to get out of the ghetto, but they're not physically hungry. Like I said, the biggest problem with our poor is obesity and problems associated with obesity. So the hunger is hunger for the title. And there's Cerrone. I mean, Cerrone's one of the toughest fighters that'll never quit. He's one of the hungriest fighters and the toughest fighters in the whole UFC. He grew up rich. Okay, he never wanted for anything. Carlos Condit, grew up with his dad was a state senator. He grew up, well-to-do. So I don't think that matters. Look how tough he is.
I think, but in general, over the course of the history of combat sports, at least a long time ago, it was maybe parts of society that weren't doing as well that ended up fighting. Maybe it's not like that as much anymore, but I think that used to have something to do with it. And the other part of it for him is growing up in that environment of your dad being this legend. Yeah. And maybe he just didn't have the same drive for whatever reason.
Yeah, for whatever
maybe
reason.
It's not money, but for whatever reason, he didn't. He's not completely his dad. He's his own person. So I think the fans, though, they come to see a fight. You probably pay for that ticket and go to see that fight because he's his son.
Yeah, and that name, yeah, but
it's the name.
But I don't think the hunger has to do with poverty, because I think boxing was in impoverished places, and that's why boxing has always been kind of a poor man's sport. But tennis, people are trying their best in tennis. They're hungry for that title, and they grew up rich. I mean, tennis was kind of a rich man's sport. Golf, you be playing as hard as you want. You're hungry for that win.
You're not getting punched in the face when you're playing golf or tennis. You're not quitting on the 9th hole
But what
because
does that
someone's
have to do?
beating you.
But you're still hungry for a title and hungry to get rich.
Yeah, but you're
hungry
not going
to get
through
out
the
of,
same physical pain.
But what does that have to do
to
with money,
stay in
though?
it.
What does that have to do with
He
being
quit
poor?
this fight because he was in physical pain or just didn't want to go on, not because he was having a good time out there.
Right, because he's not hungry. We're not talking about him. He's not hungry for anything. He's grown up a rich kid. But like I said, what about Donald Cerrone? Donald Cerrone, he's not hungry for anything physically, but he still goes out there and fights his ass off as hard as any ghetto boxer.
And he chose that career.
Right, but
It wasn't forced on him.
right. Okay, but I'm talking about like poor guys in the ghetto. They're not forced to box. You know, they could do football, they could do basketball, they could do baseball. I mean, you can play almost any sport in inner city. You know, there's even tennis, courts out there. But for some reason, boxing has always been a poor man's sport for the most part. And then tennis has been more of a rich man's sport. I wonder why that is.
I don't know, but that guy. The other thing in boxing is you look at that guy's record. He's got a good record. It's like 54 something.
Who?
Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.
But boxing has setups. Boxing has tomato cans.
If you had that record in MMA, you'd be one of the best ever.
When you
54 and 4.
That's true, but when you look at a record, you got to look at his opponent's records. I would be willing to bet that a majority of his 54 wins are guys that have losing records, like 4-12 records. I bet the average opponent that he fought or beat, if you look at their records and added them all up and did an average, his opponent's probably records would be like 4-12, 4 wins and 12 losses. I bet you anything.
Well, and that does bring up a point because when a new fighter comes to the UFC and they're 5-0, but they haven't fought in the UFC, I think that 5-0 doesn't really mean much yet.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't mean much yet because you don't know how they're going to because they're going to throw you to the wolves immediately anyway in the UFC.
In the UFC.
So it's a very different record when you start seeing that.
Boxing is a lot different than MMA, but especially the UFC, because the UFC you don't get any gimmies. In boxing you do. You get plenty of guys that are. I've seen guys fight guys that are like 0-15. They just fight guys that are opponents. We call them opponents. So they make their money. They don't get really that badly hurt, but they'll they'll get knocked out or quit in the corner or whatever to make money, and that's all they can do. So they're opponents. Tomato cans.
It's like the Harlem Globetrotters playing. Who'd they play?
Yeah.
The Washington Generals or something.
Yeah.
They always lose. Yeah, those are setups.
So that's that.
All right. Well, anyway, interesting.
That's it.
I don't know that I'd pay to go see him fight.
No, poor Julio. I'm so sorry. If you're watching this podcast, which you probably are, I'm sorry, Julio Cesar Chavez. I know you love your son, but you are as embarrassed as fuck. Embarrassed as fuck because of that, and I'm really sorry. So I don't know what to say, and I'm glad I made this video. I clicked not for children because I said the F word a few times. Sorry, YouTube, but I did click the no children. This is not for children.
On that note, have a Merry Christmas, John.
And have a Merry Christmas. And,
all right.
And all you guys out there, Merry Christmas. Thanks for coming. Thanks for your support. This is the best podcast ever. Tell your friends about it. We're also on SoundCloud and iTunes. Okay?
We are.
SoundCloud and iTunes. Pitmaster and the Dog.
Next
right?
fight's coming up, John. We got the big next fight coming up. I think the next event is...
Yeah, McGregor and Cowboy. Cerrone.
Yeah, that'll be good.
Who's your guys' pick? And if I don't get back to you guys on YouTube comments, I'm sorry. I'm terrible on YouTube. I'm really good on Facebook and Instagram. And Twitter.
Put up a poll on your Instagram
I will,
on who's going to win this fight.
Okay.
We can talk about it.
I will.
I got my vote.
Okay. Who is it?
It's McGregor.
Okay.
I think he's hungry still. I think he's training like crazy. I think he's going to look good.
And I don't think that has as much to do with it as the power, the natural skill, the natural speed, the natural power he has, and the susceptibility that Cowboy has for all of those. But I hope Cowboy wins.
Hopefully McGregor can keep it together and make this get to the ring.
I hope Cowboy wins.
Well, I'm not saying who I hope wins. I'm saying who I think is going to win.
And I'm saying hope, and I'm not even going to say who I think's going to win. But I hope Cowboy wins.
All right.
Thanks for coming, guys.
We'll find out. All right. Till next time, John.